In July of 1905, Susan B. Anthony visited Los Angeles to take part in the Equal Suffrage Day. The event included a reception at the Friday Morning Club. Sitting next to Mrs. Anthony at the reception was Charlotte LeMoyne Wills. Charlotte escorted Mrs. Anthony to the podium and introduced her to an audience of over 200 people. Later that evening, Charlotte hosted a large farewell reception in her home on Bunker Hill. During the reception, Mrs. Anthony posed for a photograph that would run in the Los Angeles Times. The photograph was captioned, "Notable Pioneers of the Suffrage Movement in America, Susan B. Anthony, Rebecca Spring, Caroline Severance, and Charlotte LeMoyne Wills." Born on July 21, 1824 in Washington, Pennsylvania, to Dr. Francis Julius LeMoyne and Madeline Romaine Barreau, Charlotte LeMoyne grew up in an environment in which social justice was the family business. Her family assisted freedom seekers in the Underground Railroad. She also attended abolition and women's rights conventions with her father in Philadelphia and Boston. In 1841, Charlotte graduated from the Washington Female Seminary, a school her father had helped to establish. In 1848, she married Pittsburgh attorney John Alexander Wills, who was also involved in reform movements. Charlotte LeMoyne Wills actively cultivated her positions on social issues, many of which echoed those of her father. While at the Washington Female Seminary, she wrote several papers on the evils of slavery. In an essay from 1838, Charlotte states that the enslaved are also in God's image. She then asks, "If this be true, what man shall presume to hold him in bondage? One would suppose in this far-famed country of the free, such a question would hardly be agitated. That every true-born son of Columbia would respond, 'Let the oppressed go free.'" Charlotte carried this belief that all were equal when she moved with her husband to California. In 1884, Charlotte, along with her son William Wills, founded Rosedale Cemetery, the first cemetery in California open to all races and creeds. In 1887, Charlotte and William also constructed an exact replica of the LeMoyne Crematory in Rosedale. It was the first crematory west of the Rocky Mountains. The reform movement most dear to Charlotte was women's rights. From an early age, Charlotte was raised to think on her own and not be dependent on others for her thoughts and beliefs. She remained a free thinker for her entire life. In 1839, she wrote in an essay, "Women will not long be content to have a voice only through their husbands, but rather their own voices will soon carry the weight that reflects their equality in God's eyes." In 1851, while attending an abolitionist convention with her husband in Rochester, New York, Charlotte was introduced to Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. Both Stanton and Anthony were members of the American Anti-Slavery Society and were also fighting for women's rights in their home state of New York. Charlotte and Anthony began corresponding, and in 1866, Anthony invited Charlotte to join the newly formed American Equal Rights Association. Charlotte would later assist Stanton and Anthony in the formation of the National Women's Suffrage Association in 1869. Over the next 4 decades, Charlotte, along with Stanton, Anthony, and others, would work tirelessly to achieve the right to vote. They traveled to conventions in Chicago, Rochester, Portland, and even here in Washington, PA, where Susan B. Anthony addressed the Washington Female Seminary. Although Charlotte, who passed away in 1908, would never see the fruition of her labors, it was her dedication and efforts that would help bring about the 19th Amendment in 1919, finally gaining women the right to vote. A speech that Charlotte gave to the graduating class of the Washington Female Seminary in 1866 demonstrated her unshakable belief that women would one day stand equal. "The time will come when girls shall receive as liberal education as boys, when great and noble careers shall be open to all those who are fitted to follow them, when the women shall not be obliged to choose between the schoolroom, the needle, and the washtub. When women are prepared to maintain a position of equality, it will be readily acknowledged that they are equals of man in rights and intellects. Then universal suffrage will follow universal freedom, no longer restricted by color or race or sex, and we shall all be alike before the law, as before our God."